There's been a lot of questions I've gotten in DMs about low end EQing, phasing, compression, side chaining. It's a topic that we'll definitely discuss more. There's one good clip on the Live with MattRad Instagram of us talking about it, which I've sent to a few people. But man, there's just so much. There's so many ways to tweak low end and worry about, or like figure out how things add up. And there really isn't a simple answer to any of it. Like, one of the things I think you and I talk about is how to think about it. And what that does is just gives you more tools to try things and listen. And that's, we get back to, that's why it's really important to have good monitoring, because if you can't hear good, clear low end, it doesn't matter how many phase adjustments you do. It's just like, you can't hear it anyway. So getting great monitoring for your low end and then tweaking from there and listening.
The thing that boggles my mind a lot of the time about low end is how little I have to do to improve people's low ends, because the amount of times the kick and the bass are out of phase, or there's a sample of a loop that also has low end in it and it's out of phase with the kick, and all I have to do is flip that loop and I have low end. Like, it's on 90% of mixes. I mean, just check your phase. And I remember an assistant that I had early on. He's like, I don't check phase visually. I listen, I flip, because sometimes out of phase will be better. I'm just like, I don't know. Find that time and show it to me where you can't get the benefit of it being in phase and what you like about it being out of phase by some other processing. Yeah. That's like, there's this, like, I think it was a Chad Blake technique that was going around in engineer world about him, like, Sansamp distorting an 808 and then flipping the phase on it. So I would do that and I would listen. I'm like, okay, goes to the mid range to give it presence, but all the low end is sucked out and it sounds hollow. Like, there's another way to do that, right? So like, that might be a technique he did a couple of times and was like, I figured it out another way. Like, to say that, that's what Chad Blake does to an 808, and you hear him on a interview being like, I leave the 808 alone on this thing. It's like, there's no one size fits all for everything, but that always blows my mind that you'd have bass layers out of phase and you think you like it because you haven't looked visually. It's like, look visually at bass. That's what Pro Tools is great for.
Yeah, you can really get in on the waveform. And the thing, I think, for people that are more starting out, there is really no such thing as perfectly in phase unless you have two identical signals. So if you have a kick drum and a bass element, even not just note by note, because the frequency changes for each note, but like hit by hit, or the attack can be in phase and the release can be, or the tail of it can be out of phase. There's no such thing as perfectly in phase unless you're dealing with two exactly identical signals, in which case
there's no such thing as perfect anything. Why would there be perfectly in phase?
So that's why phase is such an interesting conversation, because like you said, you can do a great distortion thing and all of a sudden the mid-range pops out, but it's canceling some of the low end. So maybe you try high pass filtering, so then you get the low end back, but then there's a weird phase anomaly here and you flip. Like, there's just so many ways to play with all this stuff. It's really about techniques and then experimentation case by case, for sure.
Yeah.